Thank you, Jason, for coming.
My pleasure.
Just before we get on to the Starling stuff, could you perhaps tell us what you were doing before Starling?
Certainly, yeah. So I started work in the city working on financial software, and then a week later there was a run on a bank which hadn't happened in many years, which was Northern Rock, and then that collapsed, and then the entire system collapsed around our ears. So I started a very inauspicious time for the finance sector, but basically I've been working in finance and software specifically for finance since I started, since I left university, and I joined Starling Bank about 3 years ago now. It's coming up for 3 years ago.
So 2016?
2016, yeah.
Okay.
Just at the end of 2016. And I came into the bank, and at that time the bank had about 60 people working for it, and it wasn't a full bank yet. It was only a partial bank. It only had a partial banking license. And I came in, and in my first week I was told, we don't have a system to process direct debit payments. Could you write one, please? Thank you. And that was literally the instruction. So I went away and had to create from scratch a direct debit processing system.
So just before we go into some detail on that, because in itself that's quite an interesting story, in the crowd what we often get is founders who, and one of the common themes that we've had in recent months has been the challenges in hiring people in early stages of a business.
Yeah.
So even though Starling was 60, so not necessarily very, they weren't small. I know they'd had a bit of funding by that time.
Yep.
But what was it about Starling that you thought actually this looks like something to go and join? I mean, are there any tips that you can give to people that are thinking, I need to try and hire people, this is the way to do it?
So one reason I joined was because I was asked by the CTO, who was a friend of mine who I'd worked with before and respected. So hire your mates. That's one easy way, as long as your mates are quite good. That's one easy way of getting people. The other thing was that the aim of it was quite clear. So I talked to our founder, Anne Bowden, who's the CEO of Starling Bank, beforehand, and she had a fairly clear idea of what she wanted to do, which was to rehabilitate banking, to bring banking back from the sort of, no one wants to call themselves a banker because they crashed the economy, stage of where banking was at that time, and bring it back to a stage where banking was a respected profession once again, and a profession that served customers rather than just serving itself. And so that sense of, there is a purpose behind this. It's not just, it's not just a cool new idea to do a mobile bank. Isn't that interesting? But it actually has a mission behind it. It has some sort of clearly articulated purpose that is out of the ordinary. And also the fact that it wasn't, all the other banks I've known tend to essentially view software as something they procure. So most of the software, they will go out and buy the software in from other providers. Whereas the brief for Starling was build the bank from scratch. So, actually sit down and hire an engineering department who can write a bank from the ground up. And that in itself was also fascinating.
So had Starling raised whatever it was, like the 40 million when you joined? Was
Yes.
that first big raise?
Yes,
They just raised that, okay. But they hadn't launched
No.
an app, and were you in waitlist at that time? So were you doing sign-ups and waiting for customers on the debit card? Or?
So we were at that stage.
The prepaid, sorry.
So we didn't do prepaid. So we went straight into being a bank account. We weren't doing a wait list at that time. We were because we couldn't. We wanted to wait until we'd actually got the full licensing to do that.
So when you joined,
Yeah.
just because I think one of the amazing stories is the scale and speed of the growth. So when you joined, so 3 years ago, 60 people.
60 people.
No customers.
No, well, there were.
Or just a few
So all the customers at that time were employees of the bank. So there were about, however many, there were 60 of us, there were about 60 customers, all of whom had a bank account with Starling. We did I remember the days that, for example, we got the first faster payment through, the first transfer of money from one bank to the other, and the first day that we got a direct debit payment working. Those were days where everyone was celebrating because we've done this. We managed to get one payment through the system. Yeah.
So let's go back to your first task of you were asked to basically build a direct debit system. Mm-hmm. Quite an onerous task in itself, I'd imagine. Yep. Was that you on your own? Were you leading a team? Was it? I mean, it must be pretty chaotic.
It was a cross-functional team of 2 people. So there were more people involved in that. That's a bit of a lie. So there were about 3 or 4 of us. I was the development. I was the engineering section of it. So it was just me doing the engineering. There was a payments operations specialist who understood how direct debits work, how banks worked. There was a project manager. We don't have many project managers at Starling, and essentially the only reason we have them is because the outside world works in projects, and so we have to have project managers in order to talk to the outside world and interface with them. But we had one of them working with us, and that was about it really. There wasn't a lot else there.
And do you operate in a very agile environment?
Yes, very agile. It's the most agile.
Short sprints.
So we don't have sprints.
Okay.
So the way we work is we have tasks, we have things that we know we need to do. We will the engineering is in charge of prioritizing them, and moving the tasks about and saying, right, well, this is the priority. I'm going to work on this now, and going away and working on that, and then delivering it and that sort of thing.
And so, how long did it take you to build the direct debit capability out?
So to the point where we were taking in payments, it took about a month and a half of me working on it.
Wow, okay.
So that it's about that length of time. So yes, one and a half man months of development time specifically.
And presumably on that time, so you had internal users. Were you able to release the software pretty quickly and just test it and iterate it? It's like almost like running a beta and just go for it.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we're still able to do that now. So one of the key advantages that Starling Bank has is that we do code releases to production every day. And that happens come rain, come shine. There is a constant drive to try and get code out of the door. So if you merge code into the demo environment, which is the pre-production environment, you can be pretty sure that it's going to go into production within the next few hours or tomorrow at latest.
And so, what month did you join in 2016?
October.
So October. So late October. So
yeah.
Am I right in thinking that you launched in 2017?
Yes, May 2017.
So May 2017. So very quickly, Starling went up to something like 250,000 customers. Was it literally within a month or 2 months or something like that?
It wasn't quite that quick. It was about 6 months before we had that many customers. But yeah, we did quite quickly grow.
So can you talk me through the process of going from 60 customers to the day you launched?
Yep.
Must have been, I can imagine, I was going to use the word stressful, but quite an exciting time in terms of switching that, making that switch to go, right, we're live, let's see what happens.
Absolutely.
What confidence did you have in the platform and the product that it was going to be able to scale to that number of people that quickly?
Well, we had a reasonable amount of confidence that it would handle some traffic. We didn't really sit there and go, we are confident up to this many thousands of customers or what have you. Because that's really difficult to predict. It's really, if you know where the bottlenecks are in terms of volume and in terms of scaling and where your technology is going to let you down, you go and fix them. So there's no. I suppose it's the case that predicting where the bottlenecks is going to be is far harder than just monitoring and fixing them when you notice the problems occurring. And as long as you can fix quickly, and as long as you can respond quickly to your monitoring, it's actually better to not try and predict where the bottlenecks are. And you can like use your monitoring to predict that something is going to be a problem. So that's possible. That's fine. So we've done that in the past, but I don't think we've ever just sat down and read through the code and gone, oh, that's going to be a problem, because that's too difficult.
So when did you have your first challenge from a live development perspective in terms of environment? How soon after that launch did that sort of first problem raise its head?
Right, so the first problem wasn't actually with us, it was with one of our suppliers, and I won't say who it was, but we started encountering problems in volume and scalability with one of our suppliers who couldn't handle the load we were putting on them, essentially. So that's frustrating, because obviously it's very difficult for you to do anything about that when it's a third party who is affecting you. So you have to come on and try and basically encourage them to fix their problems, and we did spend some time with them trying to fix their problems for them. But the other frustrating thing about that is it causes we want to accept responsibility for that. So when our customers come to us and say this isn't working, we have to say yes, we know, we're sorry. We don't want to sit there and go, oh, it's their fault over there. And that's for a number of reasons. One is that that sours the relationship you have with your supplier, and you don't want to do that because they're providing a service for you. And the other problem is that then that is dodging your responsibility. You took on the responsibility to of providing that service to the customers, and you decided to outsource it to a supplier. So really, it's your job.
So 6 months in, you've got say around 250,000 people, customers. Sorry, how big was Starling then? How many people were employed? Can you remember roughly? So you've gone from
roughly
60...
about 100, just over 100 people.
So you almost doubled in size in a year.
Yeah,
and did you start to notice any cultural changes within that time?
So it didn't really get... So the point at which it changed culture, I didn't really notice any cultural changes at that point. I think the point at which the culture changes really started to kick in were the point where we moved to a new office, and specifically when we got the another floor in the office. Because up to that point, we'd all been located on the same floor in the same room, albeit when we moved into our new office, the room was huge. The room was an entire floor of the building. But then after that, we rapidly found that you couldn't keep track of everyone who worked for the bank. You didn't know who everyone was, and you didn't know what everyone was doing. Up to that point, every Friday we gathered the entire company together to talk about what was happening and what had been done. And then that started to sort of peter out, basically because we couldn't fit everyone in the same room to communicate that. So then you started to feel that the various disciplines in the bank, such as engineering and marketing and so on, so it started to fragment and go off and do their own thing. And that trend has accelerated, obviously, as we've got more and more people. So you get this feeling of disconnection, that you don't know what everyone's doing anymore.
And did the split between the teams change? In that when you were 60 people, was it 80% engineering or something, and then you suddenly had a room full of marketers come in?
So not quite. So a lot of the departments, so marketing has been reasonably static. It's grown up quite a bit recently because we want to do more and more advertising. The main thing that expanded rapidly was our customer call centre, which was up to that point in one room in our building, a small room, probably about the size of this bit round here, and there were about 12 of them and so on. And then that exploded, because obviously that is the thing that is most has to be kept proportional to the number of customers you have. So we suddenly got huge numbers of people coming through who were working in the contact centre. So I think the proportional change was that we suddenly got a load of them. Engineering has so engineering is the second biggest department in the company after operations. So there are about 100 engineers. Operations in total is probably about half the company, so it's probably about 300 by now. But the engineers sort of expanded to catch up with that relatively recently.
And so how did you see any individual role changes for you? Did you have a team? How did that work?
Yeah, so for me personally, I went, so a lot of what happens at Starling is interesting in that there is a great deal of flexibility is required of all of the staff. And that's flexibility in many senses. Flexibility not only on what your goal is today or what you're aiming to do and achieve, but also in terms of what your actual discipline is, what you're mainly primarily doing day to day. So when I started, I was an engineering lead, and I was leading an engineering team doing various different. When I started, I was doing this direct debit thing on my own. Then I was leading a team of engineers, and then I moved into supporting another team, and then I moved into this talking role, which I wouldn't have envisioned doing right when I started. Now my role sort of straddles somewhere between engineering and marketing and so on. It's promotion of the bank as well as talking about its technology. And we've had other people. We've had people who have started off we had someone who started off as our, office manager and receptionist, who is now a fraud specialist, for example. We have had people who started off in payment operations and moved into engineering, and so on and so on. We had one of the interns who's been with us since I joined, who was an intern and one day was given the MasterCard specification to read. Pray that you never have to read that. That's 400 pages that you'll send you to sleep. She basically was given the job of reading that, and now she's our specialist on card transactions and payments. A lot of what your role is within Starling will change rapidly and move round, and that's still true to this day. People can jump between one discipline and another, and people don't really bat an eyelid, and that applies across the company. So we've had people on the executive move from one role into a completely different role.
So do you think that's one of the things that enables Starling to change and implement new features exceptionally quickly? Because we'll go through a couple of details, but I think one of the things that amazes me with Starling is that you've managed to implement lots of things that were traditionally very heavy banking functionality exceptionally quickly, whether it be direct debit in a month and a half, whether it be loans, whether it be current, and all that sort of thing. Does that help the flexibility of the organisation? Do you feel sort of empowered?
Yes, I think it helps. It helps to a certain extent. One of the things we got wrong with this flexibility is I don't think we offered quite enough support to people in changing their discipline, because it can be quite a big thing to go, you've been hired as an engineer and now you're going out and speaking in front of people, and you're sort of seeing, I don't really know if I'm good at this or not. Is my job secure? Am I going to get fired if I speak wrong? It's the sort of, we needed to offer more support, and I think we've gotten better at that. We didn't do that enough at the start, but certainly that is one of the things that has helped us develop features very quickly. Other things have been the fact that we are genuinely an agile organisation. Many companies I come across declare themselves to be an agile organisation, and what they mean by that is that you ask them, why do you think you're an agile organisation, and they say things like, we do stand-ups, we have post-it notes on a wall, that makes us agile, right? That's what an agile organisation is, and it's not really. An agile organisation really is one that has the flexibility to remold itself and remold the people and who they're working with and what they're working on in response to changes that are going on, in response to new data, feedback from iterations that you're doing. And this although people like to think of it as a sort of, somewhat hippie, somewhat millennial, this is a very nice fluffy thing, with rainbows and rabbits and so on, this agile thing. Actually, I mean, it does have rabbits, but it's more Watership Down. It can be more harsh and brutal than, doing things in the sort of nice, staid, project planning waterfall manner, because you're suddenly doing something and then it turns out that that's not the right thing to do, and you have to drop it, cut it, and move on and abandon it. And that helps you move really fast, because you don't have to stick to the plan. You don't have to say, well, we've started this now and we've budgeted for it, so we have to finish it. You can just go, no, it's not working, cut it.
But even within that, there must be some... Who's responsible for sort of determining larger objectives? So when you're trying to build a bank, there's a certain set of functionality that any customer, whether they be a personal customer or a business customer, will need. So you'd have to do those in a certain sequence. How is that determined within the company?
Absolutely. So it's really so there's two levels to it. First is the sort of general overall strategic objectives will be set by the board or the executive. So those broad objectives will be things like create Euro accounts, for example. Now, that will then get handed down to a team of people, cross-functional team, who will consist of designers, engineers, people in the finance department, people in the treasury department, etc., etc. And when I say that will be handed down, I literally mean that. Like, a group of people will be brought together and be told, we need Euro accounts, please go away and do that. And then they will have to sit down and go, oh, what does that mean? What do we need to do within that to deliver Euro accounts and so on? And it'll be a bit more detailed than that. They'll be told exactly what that means, and, not exactly what that means, but they'll be told the general areas of functionality. We need to be able to deposit euros in the bank, or customers do, and customers need to be able to make payments in euros to other Euro bank accounts. But that's about it in terms of definition. And then they'll have to go away and work on how to deliver that, in what order to deliver that. They'll have to, they'll have to work out whether something can be released first and made public first, and then, more functionality added on top of that later, and so on and so on. And there might be like a back and forth between them and the executive in charge to say, okay, we're going to do this first. Is this the right way to go?
Does that include sorry to interrupt.
No,
does that include a negotiation of timing and
Nope.
personnel?
So a negotiation of personnel, yes. A negotiation of timing, no. So generally speaking, we know that usually if you put more people on a thing, it gets done faster. That has limits, obviously, but no engineer in the organisation gets asked for estimates. People who ask engineers for estimates are made fun of at Starling, because because the executive knows. So one thing that really helps this is, if you can get a CEO and founder who is an engineer. That's what we have, and it really helps. Or who was an engineer in a previous life. We realise that, generally speaking, with estimating software projects, I can tell you two things. One is that any estimate you give me will be wrong, and the second thing is it will take you longer to deliver the software project if I ask you to estimate it, because you'll have to estimate it and then deliver it, rather than just delivering it. So we eschew estimates and so on in favour of just trying things out. And one of the other benefits of being agile is, if you try something out and it turns out it doesn't work, doesn't really deliver what you need, you can just abandon it. And you can abandon it at an early stage. So you can try something out, prototype something, then say, do we want to go forward more with this? And that's the measure. That's how you estimate whether a project is worth taking on to completion.
And the cross-functional team that you had, did that include marketing, or is that separate?
Yes, no, we'd also include marketing in it as well, in terms of like promoting the feature and saying when it's going to launch. And
so the teams at Starling fairly fluid. So you could be on take your direct debit example,
Yeah.
that was just you. You could be on a direct debit team with one group of people for the next 3 months, and then 3 months after with a completely different group of people working on Euro payments.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way this works is that you have essentially two different ways of slicing the people in the organisation, and this is variously called. This methodology is variously called guilds and gangs, or squads and tribes, or horizontal and vertical, or something like that. It's basically you have two different roles within the organisation. One of them is your discipline, which is what you do day to day. So, are you in marketing, or are you in engineering, or payment operations, or customer service, or what have you? Those your which way around is it? Your guild or your tribe. Then the other way of slicing it is the what you are trying to deliver right now, your current objective, and that is you might be trying to deliver euro accounts, or you might be trying to deliver direct debits, or card payments, or launching a bank account in Ireland, or something like that. That will be a cross-functional team made up of people in many different guilds, and that will be your gang or squad. And so you have to put yourself in the mindset of being in two different places at the same time.
So how does reporting and performance reviews, whatever you want to call them, how does that work in that structure?
So generally speaking, that will work in. I've heard many different ways of doing this, but the way it works at Starling Bank is your guild effectively appraises you. Your discipline, your department will appraise how you're doing, and suggest ways of improving, and do that sort of continual improvement piece. Doesn't have to be that way, but we've found that's the way that is usually easiest, because engineers know how engineers need to improve, for example.
Okay. All right. So we've got so much to talk about. So I wanted to sort of come forward a bit and then talk about a few things. So where is Starling now with customers? Bearing in mind you're literally 2 years on from.
So we're
2.5
almost
years on from
a
launch.
million. So we're nearing 1 million customers.
In 2.5 years?
In 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. So, and could you go through some of the things that Starling of a Bank have implemented in that time?
Certainly. So since we launched, we've implemented aggregated spending data. We've implemented savings goals, so different pots for you to divide your account up into. We've totally reorganized the onboarding flow and underlying structure of our data so that we can accommodate business current accounts and joint accounts and sole trader accounts. We've launched a payment as a service, so essentially the ability for you to send for a business-to-business offering where you can offer bulk payments out through an API in real time. We've joined various different schemes, so we're now a full member of BACS, for example, whereas we previously were an agency member of BACS. We've launched Euro accounts. I'm probably missing loads of stuff out here. We've launched integrations with various different things like Fitbits, Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, and so on.
So you've been quite busy.
Yeah, reasonably busy.
Okay.
That's a small subsection.
So who here has a Starling account, or another form of challenger bank account that we won't name? So it's quite an interesting area. So the whole challenger bank thing. I think there are a few things that we can talk about. We'll come back to the future in a minute. Where you think it's going. But what is it that enables Starling and other banks to do this stuff so quickly that more traditional banks takes 3 weeks to open an account, whereas you guys do it in literally 2 minutes? What is it about Starling and some of the other challenger banks? Not all. Let's just talk about Starling.
Which we won't.
We can talk about differentials, but what makes Starling different, and why are you so fast to be able to implement things?
So, what makes us different from the incumbents is that we are. So there's two things really. The first is that we really focus on the customer. So we ask ourselves, what problems does the customer have with banking, and how do we solve those? How do we solve those problems? What do they want from their financial life? How do we help them live it? And that focus is very different from the incumbent banks, whose focus is mainly how do we flog our customers more financial products, because that's how they make money. Now, that's another, I suppose, side note of why we're different, is that we can make money off people having current accounts and so on, and off, you know, just opening a current account and depositing money into it and maybe borrowing some money off us and so on. Other banks can't make money off that, incumbent banks, because their cost base is too high, whereas our cost base is much lower. And what that means is we're more incentivized to just provide a great current account. So it works for our customers and it works for us at the same time. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect is our approach to technology and our culture around technology. So incumbent banks, their attitude to technology is very much one of technology is this cost center risky thing which we have to do. We're forced to do this, but we don't really like it. And so they try and prevent it going wrong or being bad by wrapping it up in a lot of procedure. We have a lot of cotton wool around, say, you know, doing a release at a big bank takes ages because you need to jump through several hoops and you need to deploy your code to loads of different test environments, get it signed off by loads of different people. You can't have, they refuse to let the people who write the code be also the people who deploy the code, so you've got to hand it over from one group to another and let them deploy it, and so on and so on. And there are loads of these hoops and hurdles that you have to jump through. So they wrap it up all in all these procedures, and of course by wrapping it up in all these procedures, big banks never have IT problems. That was a joke, seeing how many people were awake in the audience. Of course, big banks have massive IT problems. It's just that what happens is that they have no IT problems for ages, and then suddenly they will have a catastrophic, world-ending, month-long, you know, outage where no one can access their bank account. So, you know, this sort of, you know, this sort of way of doing things is, you know, this sort of way of doing things doesn't prevent them having, you know, damaging their reputation, underserving customers, doesn't prevent the risk, it just concentrates it. Whereas Starling, our attitude to risk and technology is that what is risky in technology is doing big changes. If you do a small change, if you release one line of code out into the world, and that causes a problem, you know exactly where the problem is, and you can roll back that particular service. You can take that down, roll it back to a previous version very quickly. You know where all of the, we can read through all of the code in every one of our releases to see where the problem is. So we can very quickly diagnose problems. So we try and mitigate risk by doing very small releases and having very streamlined procedures.
Which is incredible. And one of the things that we talked about before the chat started was that as fast as your customers arrive, there are certain ways that and certain advantages that the incumbent banks have, and the way that customers are using challenger bank accounts that almost constrains your growth to a certain degree. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So can I have hands up again for who has a challenger bank account of some sort? Right. Keep your hands up if that's your only account.
Three.
Yeah, 2 or 3. Right. So
just Jason's job tonight is to convert all of the people with more than one account into only having one account, isn't it?
Yes.
But preferably actually Starling account. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm presuming, I don't know, but I'm going to guess based on conversations I've had with other people about this, that your other account is in a bricks and mortar incumbent traditional bank. Now, I'm also going to guess, and let's see how psychic I can be, that what you do is every month your salary goes into your incumbent bank and is used to pay certain big bills, and then the rest of the money you have a standing order set up which transfers money out into your challenger bank account, so you can go and do your spending on your challenger bank account and see where your spending is going. Is that fairly accurate? I'm getting some nods in the room, some smiles, yeah. So you are not alone. I'm not psychic. The reason that happens is because loads of people do that. Now this produces a hilarious situation for the banks because the challenger banks are in the problem that you're not depositing money with us. So because you're not depositing money with us, we can't lend money to other people. We are constrained by how much we can grow in terms of the revenue we get in, the profit we get in, and so on. So we're constrained in those terms because you're just, putting £1,000 in, taking it out, putting £1,000 in, taking it out. The incumbent banks, meanwhile, they're constrained because they can't see your data anymore. They have no idea what you're spending on. They can't leverage that data. So all of their big plans to build AI machine learning models gone out the window because they don't know what you're spending on because you're not spending things from their bank account. So congratulations, you've broken the banking system.
But it's interesting because so for those that don't know, a bank has to basically maintain a certain proportion of its deposits and assets registered is a bad word, but with the Bank of England, and can only lend certain amounts based on what its assets are. So if I'm right in thinking, Starling assets are about £1 billion? No, you're more than that. 10 billion is that? I can't remember what the number is.
Something like that, yeah.
So about £10 billion. Whereas if you look at so that means that they can only lend, and I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's like 60%. So they can only lend £6 billion. Whereas the incumbent banks, their assets under management they're at over £100 billion. So they can lend a huge amount more and give the money about, but as Jason said, they're really struggling to know what to do because nobody's using it to spend, or fewer people are using it at their banks to actually spend money.
Yeah, fewer people are using it as their day-to-day account.
So I think that leads us really nicely into where do you think this is going to go? Because it feels to me like there's going to be a collision. What are your thoughts?
A collision in what sense?
I think at some point in time, somebody will either say, we've either got to buy Starling, so HSBC, who manage 40 million customers worldwide, will say, actually, Starling have got 1 million customers, they're quite small, let's pay a chunk of money to those guys, and you'll have a big, enormous exit. Or you'll get to the stage where you say, no, we're going to really go for this, and Starling or another challenger bank causes a downfall of one or more major incumbent bank.
Yes, so I'll talk through both of those options.
And there may be more options.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a third option, which I will reveal in a second.
Oh, excellent.
So option one, the incumbent bank buying out the challenger. That is always a possibility. The other thing to note is that not all things that present themselves as banks are banks, which is a tricky one, especially in the app space. So banks, which are regulated by the FCA and the PRA and so on, your deposits are protected up to £85,000. So if the bank disappears tomorrow, the government will come and pay you back the money you lost. And that is definitely true for Starling. However, some of the things that present themselves as banks aren't. And so if you put your money with them and they disappear, who knows what happens? It probably depends exactly on their precise legal position. So that can be another factor which discourages people from putting money in banks. So it could be that an incumbent bank comes along and they might not buy Starling, that might be too rich for them, but they might buy like a non-bank money app and buy that and buy their customers and so on. What will happen then is they will all of the people who work for that institution will probably go, woohoo, we've been bought out, great, a load of money. And then whoever the incumbent will come in and say, right, here are the new policies and procedures. And the people will look at it and go, great, we're going to work for someone else. Thanks for the money, bye. And they'll wander off into the night, which I call the Snapchat maneuver. Is it Snapchat? It was one of the social media sites that, essentially There is someone in Silicon Valley who goes around basically serially building social media sites so that they can get bought out by Facebook, so that they won't become a competitor. The other way that it could happen is that, yes, you're right, we could become very big. Now, if that happens, I don't think that what will happen is that one of the incumbents will collapse. I think what it will do is that they will all gradually decline.
More of a decline.
Yeah, it won't be I don't think we'll get a sudden, unless there is another credit crunch and banking crisis, I don't think we'll get a sudden, this bank has disappeared. It will be that, HSBC or whoever will gradually lose out customer market share and at some point might decide, what, we don't really want to do this current account thing anymore. It's not making us any money. We're going to just move into other banking sectors and abandon, doing bank accounts. And then they'll grandfather those other bank accounts in and they'll gradually decline. We were discussing the other day whether we would ever want to buy an incumbent bank's book. And we decided no. Well, we decided that if we ever did, what we would do is we would just use the current account switching service to automatically switch them all over to Starling accounts, because we couldn't be bothered doing a migration of their hideous, accounts that they presumably had on some old system over to Starling Bank. So we wouldn't do that. Right, option number 3, the mysterious option. Option number 3.
Has anybody got any clues, any ideas what option 3 is? Because my third one was Starling buying another bank, but I haven't got a clue. Anybody got any ideas?
The brick and mortar banks win. You go away.
Sure,
The gentleman works for NatWest.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to go away because we have established and disrupted the market too much now. So I think that either we
back to option 3.
Put it like this: if the challenger banks start collapsing, other ones will appear in their place because people want this functionality which they provide. So anyway, back to, can anyone guess what my option number 3 was?
Lots and lots and lots of challengers.
That's what we've got now.
.com.
A .com bubble. Yeah. No, almost certainly there will be some. As I learnt in my A-level business studies class, Schumpeterian creative destruction, I believe it's called, where you get lots of the market gets flooded and then it collapses. Yeah, I'm sure that will happen at some point.
Come on, Jason, tell us what number 3 is.
So, number 3 is Jeff Bezos gets bored of going into space and says, a bank, maybe I shall start one of those. Either him or Tim Cook or Google, Mark Zuckerberg, one of the big tech companies suddenly says, we want to get into banking now.
So do you think you view the Apple Card being launched?
I mean, it's
a step, isn't it? It's a long way from it. But
it's a long way from an actual having a bank. But one of them basically gets the idea that they will. They want to now move again horizontally into a different sector, and this sector is banking, and they think they can make money out of it.
So this comes on to another point about one of the things that I think is great about Starling is that, as you've said, Starling aren't the traditional bank. You have underneath the technology and the platform that you actively sell to other financial institutions. So
Absolutely.
Bank of England use you for some payment processing, I believe, in some ways, at some level.
I don't know if the Bank of England
read you today. Maybe not. But you could actually turn into a platform rather than a bank and become the underpinning of all the other banks.
Sure. So we could be so at the moment the fintech sector is mainly made up of 2 types of institution, or you can divide it into 2. One of which is the UI people, the people who actually go out and get customers like yourselves to come in and download their app and register money with them, and then behind them are platforms whose job it is to connect up the apps to the underlying financial pipelines. Now, Starling is at the moment both of those, right? So we both have an app and we have the pipelines, and our app connects to our pipelines. But we could go, and we also sell the pipeline, use of the pipeline to other people. But we could go fully into the pipeline area if the app started collapsing and people didn't want to use Starling Bank as consumers. They may very well want to use it as business to business proposition. So we could rely entirely on that. At the moment, we're comfortable being in both, and we think that being in both, the two reinforce each other. So changes we have to make to improve the consumer side, help the business side, and vice versa.
So what's next or what's coming, if you're allowed to say, what's coming from Starling in the next 6 to 12 months? I mean, you've just launched Euro account,
Yep.
I believe. So what's coming up?
So for our business current account customers, what's coming up is an web interface. Technically, Starling Bank isn't an online bank. That might sound a bit weird, but the definition of an online bank is a bank that you can access through a browser. And at the moment, Starling Bank cannot be accessed through a browser. So Starling Bank is going online, weirdly, very soon with for business current account customers. With an internet offering, which will also which will have many more business-specific features, invoicing, tax features that will help small businesses do all their finances. So that's coming very soon. We are also expanding out of the UK, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, by opening up an island and allowing people in Ireland to open up Starling Bank accounts as well. And from there, we will probably expand into other European countries as well. So those two things are both on the horizon. Credit cards, I'm not sure if they get in the 12-month window, but at some point we may do them. Another form of lending to people.
Excellent. My next question has gone complete from my head. So, I'll come back to it. Somebody must have a question.
Sure. I would actually, having worked at Starling Bank, I now tend to ask the reverse question, which is, if you're not regularly changing, how do you have confidence in your security? So the way that we test our security is by constantly poking and prodding our own application to see if we can break it. So we have, in-house penetration testers who try and crack the security of our app. We get in external penetration testers every so often to come in and try and crack the security of our app. We have a load of alerting and monitoring, watching the security of our app. And if we find a problem, we try and fix it as quickly as we possibly can. Up to and including switching parts of the bank off, which I don't think we've ever had to do, but we could just, very quickly just turn the bank off if we thought that it was bits of it were insecure. But it's about constant monitoring, constant testing of your own stuff, and the constant change and improvement of the code to make it more secure. So I think that without that, then I think you could very easily have a problem which went unnoticed for a long time, or which you knew about but couldn't fix for a long time. So I actually think you're less secure the other way around. One.
Okay.
So we have demo, and then that's it. Yeah. So the confidence comes from the confidence comes from our general software architecture, which we have created to be fault tolerant. So the first question we ask when we're reviewing code or putting code in is, how could this fail? How could this go wrong? And how do we make the system catch itself up to the correct position if it does fail? Two, we've got a load of huge numbers of automated tests around that to try and stop it going wrong, and to detect common problems and that sort of thing. And three, we are very good at rolling back or fixing forward very quickly. So if we release a clanger, we can get rid of it very quickly.
On that point, actually, a little follow-up, just as getting down to technicalities for a second. If the dev's responsible for putting stuff into the pre-prod, are you personally responsible for unit tests and then through to system test? How does that testing thing work?
Yes. So
you are. Okay,
yes. So yes, the devs are responsible for creating unit and automated tests, and then testing, and then then they are forced to confirm by our automated release process that they have tested
That's right, yeah.
this thing. So generally speaking, if you give developers the responsibility of testing something, they will automate those tests because they cannot be bothered to go in and test it over and over again every time there's a change.
Yeah.
So you will quickly find that the tests get automated. One of the reasons was we came along at exactly the right time. So we came along at a time when everyone was fed up of their consumer bank accounts. So we offered this, and then word of mouth spread like wildfire of, have you seen this? This is amazing, and so on. So one thing you will have noticed if you have a Starling card, one thing you will probably notice is that there's no numbers on the front. Right, there's no numbers, the numbers aren't on the front, they aren't embossed on the card. The numbers are all on the back. The reason for that, one of the reasons for that, is that when we initially sent out cards, we had a more traditional looking card with numbers embossed on them. And people would go, oh my goodness, Starling Bank is amazing, look at what I've got, put this on Instagram or Facebook. And we went, that's fantastic, thank you very much. Oh wow, you've actually got one of the...
Got an old one and a new one there.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to show that, I won't show you the old one.
So there's the old one, if anybody wants to Instagram it, just on the number.
Quick, remember the number?
There's the new one, yeah.
So so we had to, then reissue them their card. So we redesigned the cards to be essentially more Instagrammable, if that's a word. So we redesigned the cards like that, so that people could take pictures of them, because people were taking pictures of them and sharing them on social media. So that's a great way to get, your word of mouth out, is doing that sort of thing. So the first jump to 250, also having a queue sort of works, because then if there's a queue, people think it's more exclusive. Now, part of the reason we put the queue in was just so that we were sure we weren't going to get overwhelmed with, requests, basically. We did have a hilarious evening where, unbeknownst to us, Martin Lewis from the Martin Lewis Money Show decided to review Starling Bank and said, oh, it's fantastic. And we're sitting at home, and then an alert comes up and someone goes, why are all our registration servers crashing? What's going on? Everyone's desperately trying to get the system back up and running because we got so many applications that the system crashed. So we had to quickly scale up the number of things.
So we'll come back to some more questions in a minute. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was Southampton.
Yes.
So Starling have recently opened an office in Southampton. So could you tell us a little bit about, I'm not sure if you know what drove that decision, what teams are going to be there,
sure,
if you've got any job openings, that sort of thing.
So firstly, yes, we do have job openings. So if you want to come and work for us in Southampton, it's very easily commutable from the Isle of Wight, because it's right next to the ferry. So if you live on the Isle of Wight, you can commute from there. But the reason that we opened up an office in Southampton is, well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, there's a limit to how many people you can put in an office in London. Office space is at a premium, especially in the area we want to be in, which is the tech financial hub area, where office space is very expensive. So, if you want to expand rapidly the number of staff, which we did, you have to get a place outside of London, essentially. Southampton is good because A, it's not too far away from London. B, it's got a bit of its own tech hub thing going on as well. C, it's got a good university nearby, so we have the customer service centre, which we are going to build up in Southampton, as well as the engineering function as well. So those are the two areas that are going to be based in Southampton, or partially based in Southampton at least.
And my last question, I was asked to, I don't normally ask this sort of thing, but could you just run through your stack for us?
Certainly, yeah, absolutely. So our tech stack. Starting at the top, we have our mobile apps, which are written in Kotlin on the Android device and Swift on the iPhone. And the reason for those two is because they're both the native languages of those phones. Android used to be Java, and then it moved into Kotlin, so we switched over essentially. The back end is all written in Java. We have many different services. It's not exactly microservices, but it's services that control different areas of the business. So a card service, for example, or a service to connect to the faster payments network. Those are written in Java. There's REST easy interfaces between all of them. We use REST for all our APIs, both to connect to the mobile, to connect to all the services connect to each other, and to connect to the outside world as well. We have the management portal, which is the web app that we give to the operations team to run the bank. That's written in JavaScript, in React. The database is Postgres. All of this is running in the cloud on EC2 instances, or RDS for Postgres is running in AWS mainly, although we have plans to become more agnostic to the cloud provider we run in. For safety reasons. Is there any part of the stack I've missed out? We have a load of other apps as well, most of which are written in React if they're web apps and so on.
That's great, because you've just won me £20. For the person that asked me, I told you they wouldn't say PHP. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, any other...
No PHP.
Yeah, no PHP. Any questions?
It's in-house, so we've written our own release app called Roller, which will integrates with Slack. So it will basically ask if someone initiates a release, it will list all of the commits that are going into that release. It will ask all of the developers to approve their commits. Once that's all happened, it will stage the release. Then it will go and ask for technical and business approval from a senior technologist and someone in the executive level in the business, and it will ask them, can we release this? If they both approve, the final step of actually deploying through the Amazon Web Console is manual at the moment. We haven't trusted our Autobot to do that itself yet. We have trusted it enough that if it detects that a release hasn't been done in a while, it will start a release itself and then automatically assign that release to one of the developers who committed in that release. So it will automatically force the pace of releases. We found that's very useful in terms of making sure releases get out. And it will do that all via Slack, so that you have a full audit log of what's going on.
Talking. No, you just said use Slack. You can't. Yeah, you can't do both, are you? Can you do Slack and talk?
Yeah, apparently you can. Yeah, you can phone over Slack now. So it's mainly we get them together. So that was slightly flippant. We sometimes have to use Slack to get them together to communicate, because sometimes now we're in a situation where sometimes they're in Southampton, sometimes they're in London. We track things on Jira-ish. But we're not. There's no, massive plan written up somewhere. Jira tickets are often just, do Euro accounts. Yeah, with a description of do Euro accounts. Like, people who use them as an aid memoir and write notes on them about what's been done and that sort of thing. But we're not, we're not using any specific technology to try and keep track of what's been done when, or who's on what team where, and that sort of thing at the moment. We might do in the future, So at the moment we have no plans to get into the mortgage market. What we do have is the Starling Bank marketplace. So we've partnered up with various providers that we've done due diligence on and we trust with customer data and so on, and we allow them to connect to customers' accounts if the customers authorise them via an API. So we have mortgage providers in the marketplace. So if you want to, connect up and ship out your banking data to the mortgage broker so that they can see what's going on, you can do that. And, we have that available, that functionality. Same with insurance providers, pension providers, various other different providers. So there's a lot. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about here is open banking and the the networking of banking, which is coming very soon, or is already here. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So at the moment they're not automated, and that's because we at the moment are putting much more time into building up the functionality of the bank rather than automating those interactions. We have tried, where possible, to automate the onboarding process, which is where the customer agents often get involved, simply because we want to make that as quick and as smooth as possible for customers. We may do in the future, we may look into deploying some sort of chatbot or something like that, but at the moment we haven't done that. So yeah, not yet a priority for us. But who knows, I could get back to the office tomorrow and they could turn out that they've deployed one. It's suggested to people, it's not pushed on them. Occasionally we get something where we have recently we've had a sort of a bit of too low numbers in the onboarding, the people who check onboarding documents and so on. So we will gather people in to try and check onboarding documents to speed that up. When I say we get people in, there were the first group of people who that was suggested to was the executive. So the CEO, the CFO, head of operations were all sitting around a table doing, document checking one evening. So if you signed up recently, you might have had your, documents checked by them. But that's an exceptional case. Generally speaking, if there's not an emergency, it's a case of do you want to move role? We need someone in this role. We think you'd be good for it, and then they will transition over if they want to. So at the moment, we haven't had anything to do with cryptocurrency or what have you. I don't know is the answer, and we'll have to see where crypto goes. At the moment, it's very much in its sort of initial early Wild West style phases, which is where a lot of technology starts. So at the moment, no. But that's not to say that we're against it in principle forever. It's one of those things that we'll have to watch and see where it goes. So we have Zendesk as our main customer management system, which I presume, hopefully, that was the CMS you were referring to. Cool. There are so many acronyms in banking that you can
so many CMSs as well.
Yeah, you can get confused. But we use Zendesk because they had a good API to connect to. They provided in-app chat functionality, which we could integrate into the app and that sort of thing. So we've integrated that into our own system. But then a lot of what the customer's data isn't on Zendesk, it's held in our own systems and so on, and we'll just basically have a link in their Zendesk profile that takes you into the management portal, which will display all of the data you need. So half and half, basically.
Excellent. Right, I think we're about out of time. Thank you, Jason. That was an excellent chat. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Jason.